I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm willing to work as hard as I can.
There is no past, there's no future, there's just this moment right here.
If I did that, if I can get through that, like, come at me.
Changing how I saw myself, like as a man, not just as an athlete.
It's okay that I struggle. It's okay. That's part of the deal. It's how I respond to it.
Welcome to another episode of the Limitless Athlete podcast. My name is Tom Foxley, founder of Mindset Rx'd and your host. Now, today is, I know we said we weren't doing many more interviews on the podcast, but this is a little bit different. We today are going to be running a case study on Mary Beth Prodromides. I'm not sure how to say her surname. I always forget. But Mary Beth is, despite me not being able to remember how to pronounce her surname, one of my favorite human beings on earth, let alone those that we've ever worked with. Aside from being a phenom as an athlete, winning the CrossFit Games 4 times, the Masters 5 times maybe, I can't remember off the top of my head, competing from 2012 through to this year where she stood on top of the podium again, a first place winner. She is a wonderful human being who's been through her own mindset challenges and overcome a lot of challenges on the way to becoming who she is today. And today's podcast, like I said in the show, is inadvertently, I suppose it helps us a little bit, of course, but inadvertently comes across as a testimonial. And if you want to use it as a reason to sign up with us, then that's fantastic. But if you want to use it as a framework and a resource to start training your own mindset and to see the possibilities for yourself, that's what it's intended for. It's intended to provide you with a structure, a system, a framework, an in-depth guide into how we worked on Mary Beth's mindset, taking her from a place where she initially started with, I suppose it was nutrition and body image that she started working with us about, like you'll hear about, and how that metamorphosized into a much deeper journey on mindset that tapped into her unlocking her full potential so that she had what it takes or had what it took in the final event of this year's CrossFit Games to go and win, to give her all, to have fun in competition, to enjoy it, and to take the pressure off herself because she knew she was going to tap into her full potential and be the best athlete possible. Now, if you're watching this on video, you might have seen my puppy's head creep into shot. If you're just listening, you might have heard his collar jingling. This is going to be the theme of the podcast. You're going to hear Revy a little bit in the background, making himself known, try and get famous on the podcast scene. And you'll also hear Mary Beth's granddaughter as well, who she was looking after at the time. This is all just a little bit of background noise. I hope it's not too distracting for you. I don't think it is really. But the intention here is to provide, like I said in a couple of episodes ago, an authentic insight into what it takes to be a better athlete and to train your mindset. And a bit of background noise is part of that. So without further ado, I bring you the wonderful Mary Beth. So all we need to do is start recording. And I should probably feel like I should welcome you to the show officially, Mary Beth. So welcome.
Oh, thank you.
So, the best place to start with this, I think, is like, I know you, I would say so well, better than almost all of our athletes. But obviously people who are listening won't know you as well as me. So talk to me about where you were when you first decided to work with us and what your mindset was like then.
Okay. Of course. Here. Well, when I first came to Mindset, it was through the 2 weeks free for the nutritional mindset. And because I was injured, I was super injured, dislocated my shoulder at the 2019 games. And then I talked to Mike, the head guy at Brute, Matt Bruce, and he said, Mary Beth, you really need to dive into mindset. I mean, it's going to be a long recovery, and I know you, and you need something to work on, and this would probably benefit you the most. And so I checked out different programs, and I always had it resonated. Your posts on Instagram that you posted 3 years ago and before, they all very much resonated with me. And then, but within the nutrition, it was 2 weeks free. I was like, oh my God, a mess. No wonder. I mean, just emotionally, it felt like I was a little ship out in the sea, just all over the place. My rudder was broken, so to speak, and or I didn't know I had one. How about that? I just didn't know I had a way to guide myself, and no wonder so many things. My life always felt like this, and I'm not saying that my life doesn't feel like this at times, but before, if I go on a down, then I thought for sure I'm never going to come back up. Just ride the wave, Mary Beth. My mom once told me, but now that really makes sense to me. If I could just ride the wave. And I believe that Mindset RX has helped me learn how to ride the wave, because we started talking about that our thoughts aren't necessarily who we are. And because I used to think that any thought I had was a personal condemnation at me. So in the old days, I would have just called that a critical spirit. But now I know it as through Mindset RX is the bound nature, and that I deal with one particularly a lot. And it's there a lot. So, but at least I can identify it now. So before I was just thrown about by it.
We'll definitely get into discussing bound nature and what that is at some point, and how you've used that to create change. And then I think the best place to start is like to delve further into. It's like, what problems were you facing in terms of your mindset at the time? Because I think this will unintentionally come off as a bit of a testimonial type thing for us, but the whole point of this podcast with you is to chat about like how to create change, to give people a framework to create change, and to do that, I think it's really useful for people to hear like, oh, this is where you were, this is what you're struggling with at the time, and what life was like that. So some people might go, oh yeah, that is actually how I feel.
Okay, so when I first contacted you, Tom, I was struggling with my weight, how much I weighed, because I really thought back then that how much I weighed was a reflection of who I am, really. And I still battle with that. I'm not going to lie. I just think if I'm the fittest 60-year-old in the world, I should have control of this nutrition piece by now. But that word should, I always have that. So anyway, I'm working on, through these 3 years, I remember Coach Jace, I wrote some really mean things in my journaling at me about this. Poor self-image, poor body image, I think they call it. And he just wrote back and he says, Mary Beth, what I see here is that you don't have a lot of love for yourself when you're overweight a little. And my range of overweight is between, it's ridiculous when I say it out loud. It's between 7 pounds, 3 and 7 pounds. Okay. But still, it makes me feel like I'm walking around like I'm obese. I'm supposed to be super fit, And so how does that apply? How have I changed? dude, I got in a bathing suit in front of everybody at the games this year, and I did the ski erg. That was so hard. Just so
Okay. So there's a really good point. Like, how would that have felt before mindset training, and how, like, I'm sure it was still uncomfortable and you didn't want to do it, but like, how'd that feel after? Like, if you could take your original mindset and put it in that event, like, what would have happened?
Oh my God, I would have probably figured out a way to just wear my long leggings, probably.
Mm-hmm.
And that would probably have made it more comfortable that way, but it would have drugged me down. But yeah, and I'm really good at making myself do things, but that is not one of them. My children would all attest to this, that I'd take them swimming and I would sit on the side. I missed out on so much fun with my kids because of stupid bathing suit. But post all this work and mindset, I got up in front of a ton of people in my bathing suit, and I held my head high, and maybe I didn't place great in that workout. It didn't even matter. Just the fact that I walked out there and I was able not to just be dying inside.
Yeah,
huge.
That's a huge one. That's a huge one. So originally then, like, you found all this kind of, I suppose, body image stuff. That's where this journey started. And what problems, like, or what other things arose on the way? Like, what other mindset challenges did you find along the way?
Okay, I wrote Dave Castro once in the early years of my CrossFit career, and I said, I see the individuals are all swimming a lot at the games, and I just need to know, is that going to be at the games for my age group? And he just wrote back, Mary Beth, you never know. And so
the unknown and the unknowable. Perfect.
So I had to start swimming then. And that in itself, my mom said I was a little fish when I was little, but this, I don't feel like a little fish. I'm more prepared now when I have to swim.
Okay.
I'm not as scared. The thing is, the voice in my head, the bully, the very bullyish voice is, I mean, going out to go for a swim, I don't know which games it was, 2014 maybe, and all I can hear is, you're going to drown, you're going to drown. Why are you doing this? You're going to drown. And I had to just physically say out loud to myself, you know what? You voice of fear, just you need to be quiet right now. I need you so I don't drown, but we'll talk about this after. And then I went swimming. And the fact of the matter is, this is one of your guys' strategies is not just pushing it away, acknowledging it, and then applying what you do know to get through whatever you're going through. Now that's the trick, right?
Cool. There we go. Yeah, you've explained that perfectly. So the purpose of that is to create some like separation between your thoughts and emotions and who you are, the observer, the experiencer, because then you have the potential to, like we spoke about just before we started recording, find that space between stimulus and response and then choose your action. Obviously, it's not always the easiest, but so often when we start or before we start our mindset journey, it's like stimulus response. There's no gap. Like, I'm sure you remember what that was like. There's no gap at all between like what happens and your reactions. So that our mindset ends up disrupting us, getting in the way. This is probably a great chance to talk about two things. One of them, observe your inner athletes, and like the exercise there, which is a journaling tool that we use to kind of extrapolate what's going on in the mind, and then bound nature and free nature. So let's start with like, because this is where we start with everyone that we work with. Observe your inner athletes. So how did you find those? Yeah, go for it. Go for it. So yeah, how did you find those first few observe your inner athletes? What was that process like? What did you uncover in those? I know it was 3 years ago, but like, what kind of themes did you notice coming up in your journaling exercises to begin with?
It's just so much chaos on paper. I mean, that's usually the reason why I would never journal before, was because it didn't seem to do anything. It just seemed, why am I even talking about all this stuff out loud on paper? Where is the benefit? But then through the technique of how you guys have us journal, you know, you write it all out, look back, see the themes, and then just take note. And then just the fact that we do AMRAPs, AMLAPs, as many wins as possible was really good. But what I want to say is it was chaotic. And I started to see that these different themes would come up, and it was usually that voice that spoke like a bully and was very condescending to me. And I didn't understand that at all, why I was like that at all. Sometimes, 3 years. I think I've been with you 3 years, Tom, and you and Rachel, and at least now I can identify it and more aware of it, but sometimes still it slips by, and then everything is just terrible here. Yeah. I don't know if I answered anything. All I know is that in my journaling, observing my inner athlete, I like the fact that when I write, it doesn't have to be perfect and I can just write, but that when I reread these things, I can start to see some distance from my thoughts that are on paper and be able to figure out the next steps into freedom.
Perfect. Yeah. So like that's such an important stage to reach, because you have all these kind of these stories, these narratives that just get wrapped up into what you think is you right at the beginning, and it feels really chaotic, and you get it out on paper and it's like, man, like what is happening there? Like that's uncomfortable. And what we learn is that that was the story that was there. And that was what was dominating my thoughts and emotions and physical sensations and ultimately behaviors. So for example, one of those stories, this was early on that you helped me uncover. It was when I was 6. Come on, I'm 61. Give me a break. Living under a story since you're 6 is just crazy. Nobody likes me. Everybody hates me. I guess I'll go eat some worms. That's what it was. That was the story. So of course I never felt like I belonged anywhere, and that's the lens I was looking through. And I saw that pop up just last month again. And I was like, no, I'm not 6. I'm not 6 anymore. Lots of people like me. In fact, I like me now, whereas before I don't like me. That's fantastic. Like, and that's the change. I think people get mindset training wrong when they think, oh, it's just, I'm going to be able to completely change who I am and everything's going to disappear and I'll be completely fixed. And it's like, no, like the mindset is there, but the volume gets turned down. So we don't have to just listen to that. It's like, oh, I see the old pattern and I've stopped kind of feeding it. So it stops becoming the only thing that I I kind of hear and think of. So that becomes ultimately what you referred to earlier, bound nature. And just as a quick kind of note for the listeners, we've got two states to be in. You've got free nature, which is our optimum state, which is where we are free, like where we're open, where we're confident, when we've got thoughts like I've got this, or you've got this, like you can do this, when our emotions like confident, self-assured, when we feel capable, driven, when our behaviors all line up with what we want to do, and physical sensations, you feel like you've got energy but not too anxious. And then bound nature is the opposite of that, where you're non-serving, when you are fearful, stressed, anxious, when thoughts like, oh, I can't do this, I'm not good enough, or whatever that is. So that applies through bound nature and free nature. What was your process of experiencing bound nature like? Like, what was it like to begin with, and how did that like first awareness feel for you?
Overwhelming,
Mm-hmm.
because it seemed so constant. What do they call it typically, is negative self-talk all the time, constant chatter in my head, that constant chatter of that particular, the bully bound nature is really linked to not being perfect and always on me, because I mean, come on, I can go way back to when I first started CrossFit. I remember when I got my first muscle up, and I got down, I was really excited, and one of my coaches said, now you got to get 2. And it was just like, never ever got to really feel that win, you know. But that's how all my gymnastics training had gone when I was a kid. And that's always, when any sport I played and my dad watched, it was always, okay, you did good, but let's work on this now. You know, it's just never enough. Mary Beth was never enough. And sometimes I'm not still enough in caretaking, but that's beside the point.
So this like is so, I think like the important thing to point out there is that initial phase of finding the bound nature, in all honesty, is very uncomfortable, because you see it really clearly and it can be overwhelming and it can be upsetting. But then like you start to change, right? What's that change that you start to experience like?
I remember this is when we had those people posted their work, and I could see some other people, how they organized it. Cause everything always just seemed so crazy when I was writing it down. And then I saw how this one lady had made lines and made this, I don't know, it just looked like a really cool chart. And I thought, I wonder if I could do that. And so I would write down bound nature and then what it sounds like. And just right there, just those 2 things was huge. Just being able to identify it, say, oh, that's the bully, and this is what it's saying. And then is it, sometimes I would say, is it true? But just getting that far, I know that sounds so elementary, but
not at all.
Just getting that far was huge. And even now it's huge in my life when I can just go, hey, that's that. And then it just makes a difference. And hold on a second, let me think. I don't know what day that was, but I wrote it down, and then Coach Rachel commented, wow, Mary Beth, this is good. Like, it was the first time I felt like I was starting to get a grasp of what we were trying to do. You know, before it just felt like all my mess was here on this page, and then here we go. This is identifying this. This is what it's saying. This is how it acts. This is how you can confront it. I think those were the 4 things I did. And I think that's just been very helpful, that strategy. And the crazy thing is that sometimes the strategy is just to notice that it's there and you really don't do anything about it. It's a weird thing. Let's think of.
No, you're like, I'm going to jump in there because you're doing so well. And like what you're explaining there is how you're kind of initially, when you start journaling and you start what we call the testing phase, it's so messy and all the thoughts are there. And you're just like, am I really this screwed up? Like, is this really what my brain is like? And you're like, oh, I don't know whether I like that, because all the past comes up, all the fears about the future, your current concerns, like, because we haven't really taken the time to put them into, like, to organize our thoughts. But then we start to view our bound nature through the lens of bound nature. And we're like, oh, this whole part of it, this whole confusing mess that was adding so much mystery to my life, that is actually just this story that I believed that wasn't true. And then when you see it come up, you're like, oh, it's just a story. Like, I don't need to pay any attention to that, because this is just a story that I know is untrue and I don't believe anymore. And I'm like, it might be compelling sometimes and I might feel like, oh, this is quite scary, and I might default into it. But we learn to create that gap, right, between stimulus and response.
Yeah, you said that well. I totally feel that inside. Totally.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then I think what's cool about that as well is, like, we've gone from this place where we're not really focusing on performance, but that does ultimately translate to training, right? And it does ultimately translate to performance, and ultimately, in your case, to winning the games yet again. So when, like, I think there's one story, and I can't remember the exact details of it, but like, talk to me about some choices that you had when you were at the games this year, and like those moments where your mindset really shone through.
Oh my goodness. You know, we all tend to think about the negative rather than the positive, but there were some really good things that happened. The final workout, it was an echo bike, and then these really fun burpees. Whoever says that, really fun burpees. They were it was 30 inches tall, and you had to jump over it, and you got to use your hands though. So it was really fun burpees. And there's only 15 of them, I think. And then sandbag clean, and there's only 50 pounds, and I've been working with my 100-pound bag. But anyway, the nerves, that chatter, the chatter in your head while you're warming up, and you're trying to hold it together, and you could think about all a million things that could go wrong. And it was like so cool, Tom. We had a session, you and I, and it was a session when I still didn't know what I was doing, if I was going to go to the games or not. and we're trying to weigh the factors and what are the goals this year. And we were just talking, and then you started talking about the fact that when you go to the games, you're going to have to be committed, Mary Beth. I mean, you have to be committed, because when you're not committed, that's when injuries can happen. But that's not what was so cool about that talk. You just start talking like, you start saying I am statements. Such great. I am powerful. I am strong. I am, anyways, those kind of statements. And that's what came into my mind, was instead of all this unnecessary worry and chatter, I didn't need to pay attention to that. Mm-hmm. And then it was so cool. I came up with those words for the echo bike. I can't remember how many calories it was, but I knew. I mean, just not great at the echo bike. I knew I'd get off midfield. You know, I would be behind. But so on there, I told myself, I am determined. No matter all these people getting off their bikes way ahead of me. You know, I'm determined. And then when I got to the burpees, I'm speedy. And that's what I said. And I'll tell you, jumping off the bike and hitting the floor, I did not feel speedy, but it didn't even matter because I had that in my mind. I'm speedy. And so I covered up, I made up a lot of ground there. And then the sandbag, I am strong. And I only missed one rep. And even if I hadn't missed that rep, I still would have took second in that workout. But the whole time I am strong. It was very light and it moved pretty quickly for me. But that's what I in warm up did instead of the overwhelming desire to be very worried and nervous and all that kind of chatter. I just started repeating these 3 things. I am determined, I am speedy, and I am strong. And when one would come up, it wasn't like I was pushing those scary thoughts away. It was just like, yeah. We always deal with this. Stop it. Let's go. You know, I'm going to focus here. And I was saying it out loud and my coach goes, what are you doing? And I said, these things seem very important to me right now. He goes, that's okay, Mary Beth. Good. I like it, but say it in your head. So I did, no big deal. That was fine. I said it in my head. Maybe I looked a little crazy. Maybe that's why. But
doesn't matter when you're standing on the podium, though, does it?
What?
It doesn't matter when you're standing on the podium, though. When you're standing on the top of the CrossFit Games podium, and you're like, I won. Like that's you can be all the crazy you want.
Yeah, all I know is. This is not the only place in competition that this is effective. Because when my dad was alive, you and I worked through some of this about just what are my words before I even go in the room to take care of him. And it was be kind. I got this. Be kind. I got this. And it wasn't always easy to go in there. It's not always. Caretaking is hard. It's the longest, hardest workout of my life. But it's worth it. So being able to write down my chaos for my observing my inner athlete for real life stuff has been helpful and transferred over to my state of being in workouts. But Tom, I couldn't really separate the two because they're so close. They feel so close. They do.
Course. So there's one thing that I want to point out here, and I think it's a nice place to wrap up, is that we can go into workouts with all these kind of thoughts. Like if you had like that, I'm speedy, I'm determined, I'm strong. If you had that, and you're still overwhelmed by negative chatter, and you hadn't done all that work that you'd done building up to that point to create the separation between you and your thoughts, they wouldn't have been effective. But because you've done that work, because you've created the distance, because you can just see that was bound nature and you weren't in free nature, that was your opportunity. And that's why that works so well. So, you've done fantastically. And I know I've said this to you before, but I'm immensely proud of you.
Thanks. It's huge, You're right, because I can remember back 2013, that's way before Mindset Rx'd, and I was doing some of those kind of statements just to, I got this. Come on, Mary Beth, you can do this. Let's go. Like that. It's different. And it didn't work. I still was just as nervous. This, I feel, was, you're right, ignited it was the pre-work I'd already done that fueled those statements through. I mean, that short, quick, final sprint WOD. Who couldn't ask for a better workout for Mary Beth? The sprint, you know?
Nice.
It was good, even though it was very hard. I'm not gonna lie. It was hard.
Of course. But it's effortless effort. There's the decision to put that effort in and get to that place isn't so laborious as it would be without that. And you don't have to force yourself to do that. It's just the natural decision. I think this is a really good place to wrap up, not just because it's, it ends with you winning the games, but also because I can hear my puppy whining to go outside, and I'm sure you've got other things to go and do. So, thank you so much. And, where can people find you on Instagram if they wanted to follow you, Mary Beth?
CF_Mary Beth on
Perfect.
Instagram. Mary Beth Prodromides on Facebook. I welcome anybody who wants to talk about, CrossFit or mindset. Love it. That'd be great.
So thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I feel very privileged.